Welcome to another episode of Dad Can We Talk? I am your host, Anthony Ray, and this is episode 125 of Dad Can We Talk? Before we get started, I want to send a shout out to my sponsor, TriTech. TriTech offers an online course that allows students to become certified sterile processing technicians. This course is $800 and payment plans are available. After successfully passing the course and passing the national certification exam, students will be nationally and internationally certified for 5 years. After 1 or 2 years of experience, traveling contacts are available. This is a great way to get into hospitals where the hospitals offer sign-on bonuses, raises, tuition assistance, tuition reimbursement, 401k, and great health benefits. So you want to learn more about this opportunity, go to www.tritech.net and get in contact with them to find out how you can do something different. If there's something that you're interested in, you want to get into a hospital, you want to get into a new career, into healthcare, this is a great opportunity. Another thing before we start, I need for everyone to go to YouTube. If you see this on YouTube, subscribe to the YouTube channel at Dad Can We Talk. And that's the greatest way to help the podcast, by subscribers, by likes, by shares. That helps with the algorithm. That's the way to get things rolling, and the algorithm continues to share the podcast with others. So today for episode 125, I am here with the man named Allan Shedlin, right? Said it right.
Shedlin, yeah.
Allan Shedlin. So he reached out to me a few days ago, and he has something I think that's great. I haven't heard too many things like this, so like what he's doing, and so we're gonna talk a lot about that. I'm sure he has a lot more experience with fatherhood than I do, so I am interested in hearing his story and gaining this good wisdom from him. So yeah, I'm ready to get right into it. So you guys, welcome to the Dad Can We Talk community. My man, Allan Shedlin. How you doing, man?
I am flourishing, thank you. And I think it's really an amazing coincidence that I'm on your 125th podcast, because that's exactly my age.
So this guy, he is officially the oldest to come on the podcast.
Right.
At 125.
Yeah.
So, well, we're going to start the podcast off the way that we always started off. I have the same question for every episode, and we're going to do it the same way here today. So my first question for you today is, what was your relationship like with your dad?
So my dad, I knew, would always be there in a pinch for me. But as with many of us, I needed more than a pinch. So my dad was a businessman, and he spent 250 days a year on the road selling his goods for 25 years, 250 days a year for 25 years. I've never been great in math, but what it tells you and me is that he wasn't around a lot.
Yeah.
And when he was around, he wasn't always around.
Yeah.
So he, was thinking about selling his goods and manufacturing his goods and so forth. So my relationship was a loving one with him, but it was always one that I craved more of his time and attention. And I am the middle of 3 brothers and a younger sister as well. So I guess I felt like I didn't get as much time with him as I would have liked.
Oh yeah, I definitely get that. I get that. So as you where did you grow up? Where, like, what region, like where did you grow?
So I haven't grown up. and I have no intention of ever growing up. Can't help but get older, but I have no intention of growing up. Um, so I was born in New York, um,
Mm,
in New York City, in Manhattan, one of the five boroughs, and then we moved when I was 10 to the Bronx, and that's where I went through high school. Um,
mm,
that's where I began.
mm. And so during that time, when you were growing, like what was life like, inside of your home growing up in that time in New York City? You're in a huge city, you know, not really super close with your dad. Like, were there any guys in the neighborhood, other men that you looked up to, or any other role models that people that you looked up to around?
When you say what was it like, so you already can tell I'm a little bit of a smart ass. So um, you know, I can remember when the first television came out.
Mm.
That's all so, and that's true. And it's also true that, when people ask me if I have a tablet, I think about, the Ten Commandments kind of tablet. So times were really, really different then. But really to get serious about your question, and it's a great question, because one of the things that I've written about, and I do a lot of writing about what I call daddying, um, is that one of the pieces I wrote is called Creating Your Patchwork Dad. So
Mm,
very few of us are really fortunate enough to end up having exactly the dad we wished we had or we wanted to have. And so my notion is that we take bits and pieces, and clearly your question indicates that you're thinking pretty much the same way. We take bits and pieces of other male role models in our lives, and it can also be women in terms of their personalities and attributes and things they bring to it. So yes, I had a number of male role models that I really look up to. I've recently written a blog called I Really Lucked Out with My Fifth Grade Teacher, because my fifth grade teacher was my first male teacher other than in phys ed, and that's
mhm,
unusual, by the way, because there are not so many men teaching at the elementary level. Um,
mm,
but that fifth grade teacher was my primary male role model throughout my life. More important to me than my dad was in terms of being a male role model. And then I had a
mm,
whole bunch of other male role models for me and men I looked up to. Another one was the good humor man who sold ice cream outside my elementary school. Another one was when I was a senior in high school and I started working with seriously disturbed children at a summer camp, and he was the director of the camp. He was a professor at a college. So I have a whole bunch of role models that I use to create my patchwork dad.
mm. No, that's good. That's good stuff, man. That's good stuff. And I'm always interested in that, with people that are older than me and, just understanding how others grew up. I know that the way that I came up is so much different than the time that my children are growing up in right now. And I'm always telling them that, there's different things that we did then, and I would tell them about that, and they would say stuff like, well, Daddy, you would never let us do that. I'm like, yeah, I won't. We live in an entirely different time right now than when I was growing up. I think it was a little safer back when we were growing up. We didn't have all the super technologies with phones and or cell phones and tablets and iPads and all these different things. I'm like, I mean, it's a different time. And so sometimes they don't get that. They think, well, Daddy, you told me that you used to do this and you used to ride your bike 2 and 3 miles down the road and your mom didn't know where you were. And I'm like, yeah, I did used to do that, but I would never let you guys do that. Like never, especially not in this time. So with what you saw growing up, how did that translate into once you became a father? Like how different was the time of your adolescence to the point to where you became a parent? Like how were those two things, how did those two things correlate and how do you deal with that?
So that's a really good point and really good question. So in the interviews before we were recording that I mentioned, I've interviewed 205 dads from 20 different countries, ranging
Mm,
from 16 to 104. And so I've listened to a lot of stories.
mm,
And the times are completely different. And what I discover, and I do a lot of daddying workshops, is that each generation thinks it's harder and harder to be a parent, and it's harder and harder for kids to be growing up. And I
mm,
think they're right.
mm,
So I am the father of three daughters. So if you ask me how long I've been at this, I've been daddying for 165 years. And I know that sounds odd, but that's the ages of my three daughters added together. And each
mm,
one has been a different experience for me, and it's a different experience for them.
mm,
And so that is the way I think about it. I also have five grandchildren. And so, which total around the same ages, total age as well. And so, yes, I've had this discussion also with my daughters, like, Dad, we used to be able to do this. I would never dream of letting my kids do that. So when I mentioned to you, Anthony, that one of my role models growing up was a good humor man outside my elementary school. Um, and in fourth grade, he would allow me to stand with him and hand out napkins to the kids who were buying their ice cream. When I was in fifth grade, he allowed me to wear one of those things you used to wear in your belt that made change for people. And he would allow me to reach into the freezer on the truck and pull out some of the things that the kids wanted. And when I was in sixth grade, he allowed me to drive around the neighborhood with him in his good humor truck. Now,
mm.
think about that. Would you ever allow your kids to do that? Never. And the good humor man would never be allowed to do that either, because he would
Yeah.
be accused of all sorts of stuff. So for me, that is very dramatic change. I would allow my children, I lived in Connecticut when they were growing up, and they could walk about a quarter of a mile to the end of our lane and wait for the school bus. I I would never allow them to do that now. Uh,
Yeah. Yeah,
no,
that's wild.
I'd be walking with them. I'd be standing with them until the bus came. Um, so the world is completely different, and it is hard, I think, for kids to understand. But Dad, when you were growing up, I rode my bicycle all around my neighborhood in the Bronx, and I never came home after school. I was always home in time for dinner, but between 4 and 7, I was never home.
Mm,
I didn't really want to go home. I wanted to hang with my friends. Can you
mhm,
imagine? Nobody asked me when I walked through that door in time for dinner, where were you?
mm,
It was like we didn't need to worry. You didn't seem to get yourself into trouble, and you always come home for dinner.
mm.
Would we ever allow our kids or grandkids to do that now? Not a prayer, not a shot. You didn't have lockdown at your school.
Exactly. Yep.
Right. Yeah. So, I mean, it's just an entirely different world. I think we haven't really coped with what all of these differences mean for children. Um, and that's a whole other podcast another time. But yeah.
Exactly. That's a lot. Seriously. But yeah, that's man, that's something I deal with a lot when it
Yeah.
comes to my children.
Yeah.
With you having, your three daughters, your grandchildren, what are some of the most valuable lessons that you've learned from them just, as a father or as a grandfather, like what are some of the most valuable lessons that you've learned in that experience?
So I've learned a lot. As I mentioned to you before we were recording, so in addition to doing the 205 one-on-one daddying interviews, before that I did 28 focus groups with kids as young as 5 and as old as 1. And the reason I did the focus groups with kids, if you think about daddying, and I think we weren't recording when I pointed out the difference and the distinction I make between fathering and daddying. So fathering is a one-time biological act requiring zero commitment, just a shot of DNA. Daddying is a lifelong process that happens where fatherhood and nurturing intersect. So I have a gigantic difference between that. So if you think about daddying as a product and you want to improve a product, you talk to the consumers. And the consumers, of course, of daddying are children. And that's why I did the 28 focus groups. So what I'm about to share is what I learned from the kids and what I learned from the dads, in addition to what I've learned directly myself as a dad and as a granddad. So the most desired quality that I learned, and a lot of it is common sense, but there ain't nothing quite as uncommon as common sense. That is the most desired quality from a father is being there. But the kids say, I mean, really being there. And so it's what we talked about earlier, which is your father can actually be physically present, but if he's logically somewhere else, he may as well not be there. And if I want to be provocative, I can say it's worse than not having your father there at all, because if your father's not there at all, you have no expectation he's going to be there. But if he's physically there and he isn't there, emotionally, psychologically, it's very difficult. And being there is the single most desired quality. The second one that I've learned that's really, really important is to take your children as seriously as they take themselves. So if you say to your, you tell me you have a 7, 8, and 10-year-old kids. So if you're a 7-year-old and you comes home and you say, how was school today? And she says, it was terrible. I got teased, in the lunchroom. And part of us as adults want to say, yeah, well, wait till you grow up. You think that's a big problem? You should know about some of the problems I have. But for your 7-year-old, gigantic problem. And so you need to take it seriously. You need to, not use yourself as the template. The third quality that the kids say is important is to be an advocate for your child. I use the term, my organization is called the Dadvocacy Consulting Group. So be an advocate for your child. Fourth quality they mentioned is showing affection. So, that speaks for itself. So those are some of the things that I learned. One of the things, I had this discussion with my youngest daughter last night. So my grandchildren, because we said that I was 125 years old. So my grandchildren range in age from 17 to 27. 17-year-old has been waiting and waiting and waiting to hear about whether or not she got into college, the college, first choice college. And I have, for the last few weeks, actually the last few months, have been dealing with her mom's anxiety about her daughter getting into the school she most wants to go to. And so being there doesn't stop. Sorry to tell you that, Anthony, because you can see on, but it doesn't stop when they get to be your age. So if it's a lifelong process, which I believe it is, you spend some time being there for your adult kids also. So it's
Mm.
listening to her anxieties about her daughter. And the good news is last night she found out she got into her first choice school.
Uh,
So we are all so relieved. And as I said to that daughter, so it's been hard for you because you're so empathic and you really feel your daughter's anxiety and so forth. And guess what? I still feel yours.
mm.
Yeah. So it's a lifelong process. Yeah.
Oh yeah. Now that's some good stuff, man. I like that you what you said about taking their problems as serious because that's something that I don't do a lot of times. I sometimes they would come to me about different things. I'm like, yeah, just don't think about it that much, and I would give them answers like that, like don't let it get to you. And I think it's easy for me to say that because I'm in my 30s and I'm like, it's not that serious, like just don't let the people get you all up in arms and stuff. But like you say, they do take those things serious. Like to them, that's everything. And my daughter had an issue like that a few weeks ago when she came home from school and she was just telling me how she feels like she doesn't have a lot of friends, at her school. And, I think she's struggling with being different than others. She feels like, you know, everyone everyone else has a lot of friends and she only has like two. And I'm like, I mean, yeah, I get it. But, you know, one thing I did tell her was when you're different and you don't want to follow the crowd, a lot of times you won't have a lot of friends. That's just reality. But I did hear her out, hugged her, I kissed her, let her know I love her. And she's been good since then. She hasn't mentioned it again, but yeah, so that's definitely one of those things. Definitely.
The other thing, Anthony, and I had a call yesterday from one of my granddaughters who happens to be a special ed teacher in Los Angeles. And
Mm,
she tends to call her Gramsci, as she calls me. She tends to call me when she's got an issue, since she knew that I had been a special ed teacher to begin with in a million years ago when I began my career in education. Um, and she tends to call mostly when she's having an issue, either with a kid or with a supervisor or something. And so how I answer the phone with her, because I have caller ID. So when she calls and I know it's her, I begin this way. So I want you to tell me how you're flourishing today.
mm,
I immediately try to direct that, even if you're calling me because you have a problem or you have an issue, what good has happened today to you? Nothing. Yeah, well, you woke up, didn't you? The sun was
mhm,
shining. You went to school. Tell me one good thing that happened when you got there. And you can always find something. You really
mhm,
can. And it doesn't need to be a big thing. I mentioned to you before we were recording that I used to be a school principal in New York City and at an elementary school. And you got sent to the principal's office for three reasons. One was the usual reason you get sent to the principal's office. The second reason was if you were caught being good.
mhm.
The third reason was if you told a really bad pun or dad joke. You got sent, and the teachers would say, that's worse than the ones he tells us at the faculty meetings. He's got to hear this one. Um, so I'll give you an example. Do you know why you know how to make a Kleenex dance, a tissue dance?
No.
You put a little boogie in it. So, it's that kind of ridiculous, silly, uh, riddle. And so, even if that's what you do with your kids, but if you focus, like when I say to that granddaughter, what positive happened to you today? How are you flourishing? It's not a bad thing to do with that daughter, who and I understand, and it's very serious for her. As you know, our immediate instinct is to say, yeah, well, wait till you grow up, you'll know what a real problem. Well, for her, that is a gigantic problem. So
Huge,
sounds like you
huge.
did well.
You know. So you went right where I was about to go next. You've had some experience as a teacher, as a professor, as a principal. What are some of the key experiences and challenges that shape your perspective on education and family support?
So there are a whole bunch of things. One is that you may be familiar with the term that's used if your kid is, quote, a child with special needs. That's a problem for me, that whole terminology, because my opinion is that all kids have special needs. But if your kid has a special need and labeled as such, the school is required to create an IEP, an individual educational program for them. I believe every kid should have an IEP, not just, quote, those kids who have, quote, special needs. So that's one thing that I've learned. The second is highlighting the positive, and looking for the strengths and assets for kids. The third is, and it's always been a big deal for me, it's, I can ask you, Anthony, when I'm going to guess that if you had any male teachers in elementary school, it was either in phys ed or in fifth grade or older.
You're spot on. I had a fifth grade, the male teacher, fifth grade, and outside of that, it was PE teaching.
So it ain't because I'm smart. It's because there are very few males who teach at the elementary level, and it's really not gotten much better. And so that's another thing I've learned, is the importance of finding other places where you can have a male role model if you're not going to get it in elementary school. It could be a coach, it could be a minister, it could be a grandfather, it could be a big brother, it could be an uncle. So is to how important it is for boys and girls to be able to identify other people who you can look up to, who have qualities that you might want to incorporate yourself moving forward. So it's the importance of having identifying males who can serve as, role models for you as you get older. And then for me, because I was a principal at the elementary level, as I mentioned, and I was always told, and this is now a long time ago. I left my principal's job 40 years ago, so it's really a long time ago. And I was always told when people asked me what I did, so Allan, you're not serious about staying at the elementary level. You're a guy. You really want to be a high school principal. You want to be a superintendent. You want to be a college president. No, I don't. I want to stay at the elementary level. And I have taught, as you made reference, I've taught all the way from graduate school up to nursery school. That's the way I like to say it, because I think the earliest years are where the foundation is laid, where the habits are formed and so forth. That, in my opinion, is the most important level. It's not the most important level in most people's mind. If you're introduced as a speaker at a conference, you usually introduced by where you got your last degree. So when I left my principal's job, I started and ran for 10 years something called the National Elementary School Center. And we had 2 annual conferences, and we introduced our important keynote speakers by where they graduated from elementary school. And it got people's attention. We didn't mention where they went to college. Yeah, so that's one of the learnings. And then just from an education philosophy standpoint, 2 things. One is there's a concept of progressive education, which basically said you learn by doing. So have a lot of activities where kids learn by doing it rather than being told how to do it or lectured to about how to do it. And the third, and this is really, really important, in my opinion. So if you're a dad, you are a dad, Anthony, and you go to school to hear about how your kids are doing. You as a parent usually refer to that as I'm going in for the teacher conference. So if you work in a school, you refer to it as the parent conference. Okay, next week we have parent conferences. No, you say, no, next week I have teacher conferences. So at my school, we changed the name. We called it the student conference.
Mm.
And parents were shocked by this, not that we changed the name, but by how we followed it up. So the conference will take a half hour. The school will take responsibility for the first 15 minutes. You got responsibility for the next 15 minutes. And so the idea is that school and home need to work together. It's all about that student. And so how that student comes to school is really important. Some information about, the home and what goes on in terms of the activities and what their interests are and so forth. By the way, the parents were not pleased initially with telling them that they had responsibility for half the conference. And I like to use humor where I can. And so what I said to the parents is, we're going to make a deal with you before the conferences. So we will promise, if you promise not to believe everything you hear about school, we promise not to believe everything we hear about home. And of course, that's sort of a funny way of saying it, but it put the fear of God into them. Like, oh my God, they're talking about what's going on at home. Oh my God, I hope it doesn't about. Yeah. So anyway, I hope that answers the question at least somewhat.
Oh no, that's good. That's good. How would you say your National Elementary School Center, how would you say that it's made a difference in the education system?
I'd like to believe it did. So the National Elementary School Center had three goals. The first goal was to dignify the importance of the earliest school years, because as I just said, usually that's not considered the most important. You usually say you're working your way up the educational ladder. And usually, and there's a reason that you call your last degree your terminal degree. It's probably killed you on the way to earn that degree. So the first part is acknowledging that the most important level of schooling is the beginning. The second thing that we tried to do at the National Elementary School Center, if you are a special educator, as I was to begin my career, you are used to, as a teacher, you are used to talking to people in other professions that have to do with children. So you're used to talking to a psychologist, a psychiatrist, a neurologist, a social worker. When you're in regular education, that doesn't happen unless there's a problem. So that was the second thing we tried to do, is bring people together across their silos, their professional silos. And the third thing we tried to do, having begun my careers in the New York City public schools and ended my in-school career as the principal of an independent school, is I experienced that we tend to see the other almost as the enemy camp. And so the third goal, objective of the National Elementary School Center was acknowledging we're all colleagues and we all have something to share with each other. We create a concept called the school as a locus of child advocacy. And what that was about is really simply stated by a 7-year-old who said to me, mister, it's really hard to learn when you're hungry. And so the notion was using the school itself to be the place that described, acknowledged, evaluated all the needs of the children, and what wasn't being taken care of outside, we had to figure out a way to point out was necessary to be taken care of. And if the school needed to figure out a way how to do that, it had to. We had a couple of pilot schools in Harlem, which is where the center was located, that used that model. It had initially, when we posited the model on how you do that, how do you evaluate the needs of the kids? Are they hungry? Do they have a toothache? Are they, in a homeless shelter? All of the things involve the kids' life outside of school impact much and how able they are to learn when they get into school. So the criticism of that and the pushback on that was, hey, mister, why the schools? And so I said to them, so did you ever hear of the bank robber named Willie Sutton? He was the most famous bank robber in the United States years and years and years ago. And he was interviewed and they asked him, why do you rob banks? And his answer was simple. It's where the money is. So if you ask me why the schools, it's where the kids are. And so the other pushback was, Mister, the schools aren't doing a good enough job educating the kids. And now you're asking them to do more. Isn't that the job of the parents, is to be their child's advocate? And again, because I'm a smart ass, my response was, can you tell me one child you know who you think has too many advocates? Number one. Number two, what do you say to the child whose parent, for one reason or another, is not able to be as strong an advocate as they might like to be? Do you say to that kid, tough luck, kid, that's the way it goes, so we're not going to advocate for you? No, I don't think so. So for me, it was a lasting impact of some of the things that we did at the National Elementary School Center was to just create those kind of questions, answers, things you can do. So the center doesn't exist anymore. We closed it after 10 years because I was spending way too much of my time begging for money to keep it open. And I wanted to be doing the programs, but some of those programs still exist.
It's good. That's some good stuff, man. Good stuff. Share with me more about your Dadvocacy Consulting Group and the services it provides to support fathers and families.
Okay, I'm of course delighted you asked that question. So our current obsessive focus is on the Daddying Film Festival and Forum, which is very subtly behind me. And by the way, that logo was created by an 11-year-old child. And if you see that if you're in the film world, you usually say lights, camera, action. And that 11-year-old said, no, we're going to change that. And it's going to say lights, camera, daddying. It's a really cool idea. And so what the Daddying Film Festival and Forum, there are 3,000 film festivals around the world annually. There is none that focuses on and shines a spotlight on the importance of dad involvement. And so what the festival is, this is year 3, so it's all very new, and we're learning a lot by doing, as I mentioned. And so what it is kids make films up to 10 minutes long. Most of them are 1 to 3 minutes long, but kids elementary level, middle school level, high school level, and undergraduate college, they make films that have something to do with fathers. And there are 5 themes this year. One is just simply a letter to my father or a father figure, very important, the father figure piece. Second is the most fun thing I ever did with my dad or wish I could do with my dad is. The third is if I could make one wish come true for my dad, it would be. And the fourth is a new category this year, which is category about men caring. So it's not really, so for instance, we have a film submitted this year about an adult dad who's taking care of his dad. So it's showing, a dad caring. Um, so those are some of the themes, and the kids send it in. And when they send in their films, they are judged by other children. So we train other children about how to judge a film. I usually begin in the training by asking them if they've what's their favorite film they've seen recently. And if they say, Encanto, or it's a Marvel movie or one of those, I say, when the films that you're judging come in, that's not your metric. That's not what you're using to judge the film. It's not a Disney production, that costs millions and millions of dollars. It's a film done by a kid like you. And so the kids submit the films. The student judges narrow it down to 10 semifinalists in each of those four grade categories. The 10 semifinalists are then sent to people in the entertainment industry and or educators who narrow it down to 5 finalists. Each of the 5 finalists earns $250. And then those 5 finalists in each of those categories are put online for a week in May 2nd to the 9th, and the public gets to vote. And the winning film in each of those categories earns an additional $250, and not an Academy Award, not a Golden Globe, not a SAG-AFTRA, not an Emmy. They earn an Atticus, which, as I mentioned before we started recording, is based on a primary character in the movie and the book, To Kill a Mockingbird. And Atticus Finch is his name, and he's considered the best portrayal of a father or father figure in literature and the movies. So they receive an award, which is a mockingbird based on a pedestal. And then on the forum, so it's the Daddying Film Festival and forum. So in the forum, we show the winning films live this year in Philadelphia. And after we show the winning films, we break into small discussion groups with the adults and the kids in the room about the themes and the issues that came up in the film. So that's what it's about. It's a work in progress. Last year, we opened it up to adults to submit films as well, and independent filmmakers. We received films last year from 21 different countries, which kind of blew me away. And, sort of showed that this theme is an important theme universally. And so that's what we're about, primarily at this point. We also do daddying workshops, and so those have been done in penitentiary, on Native American pueblos, at the World Bank, at Head Start centers, in schools, and corporate headquarters. And basically what those are entitled is Becoming the Dad I Want to Be. So those are the primary things we do. We do a weekly blog. And by the way, Anthony, we'd like to invite you to create a guest blog for us. So those come out every Thursday. We also on Fridays do on Facebook and Instagram, we call it Fun Friday, and we put a cartoon or a dad joke or pun on there. And then we also now spotlight one of our quote friends, and we hope that Dads Can We Talk will be a friend. And so what you do as a friend is you allow us to use your logo, but more importantly, you put out the word about this film festival to your network so that we can get more films submitted. each year that we do this. So that's what it takes to be a friend. You'll see on our website, which is very creatively called www.daddyingfilmfest.com, and you'll see all of the folks who are in our circle of friends. A lot this year from the Philadelphia area, which is where we're doing the festival. So those are some of the things we do. A lot of writing, and on Friday, as I say, we shine a spotlight on one of our friends, so that we'll say, what does Dad, can we talk? What does it do? You would put maybe a mission statement and a link to your website.
I love it, man. I love it. I'm curious, in the logo, is that the mockingbird on the pedestal
No,
right up under the D3F?
no, that's part of the camera.
Okay, okay. I was just curious,
But if you go to the website, you'll definitely see a picture of what it looks like. Yeah. So we're also trying to get this year, and this I'm sure will make you smile, and certainly will make your friend from Camden and Philly smile. So we know that if we are able to attract a celebrity to support what we're doing and sort of to be a face behind what we're doing, that it will immediately, in most people's mind, make it more credible. And guess who the celebrity would most like to have in Philadelphia this year? And the guy's name is Jason Kelsey. So he is, as you know, as of just this week, announced his
retire
as the center for the Philadelphia Eagles. And they did a documentary about him last year, when he was considering last year retiring, about him as the dad of at that point of two. And when his wife came to the Super Bowl, the Kelsey Bowl, as they called it, when his wife came, she was literally 1 week shy of delivering their third child, and brought along with her obstetrician gynecologist in case she was going to give birth at the stadium. She waited a week. So he has 3 daughters now, and he talks about, in a wonderful way, the importance of being a dad, and being a husband and being a son. So he's the ideal macho dude who is able to cry and talk about the importance of being a dad. So we're trying to figure out how to get to him, because we ain't the only one looking to get to him, and we don't have money to pay him to do it. So that's what we're hoping for. So that's what we'll be doing in Philadelphia. And we're thinking that next year, as I said, it's a work in progress. This is only year 3, that we will not have only a half-day live event. We will definitely have at least a full day, because we have received so many feature-length films submitted by adults, and not just men, by the way, by women as well.
Good stuff, man. It's good stuff. Got a few more for you.
Okay.
How did what inspired you to create the Daddy Wishes Fund and the Daddy Appleseed Fund, and how has that initiative helped fathers and children?
So what the Daddy Wishes Fund is that dads can apply through a 501c3, what the IRS refers to as a nonprofit organization. I do not use that term. I do say 501c3 because I'm not going to try to convince the IRS to, and I don't have time for that kind of stuff. But so I refer to them as social profit organizations, not nonprofit. And the reason is, I think we need to describe ourselves by what we do, not what we don't do. So
Mm,
if through an organization, a 501(c)(3) social profit organization, the father says, I'd really love to take my kid to the aquarium. I'd really love to teach my kid archery. I'd really love to go on a camp out with my kid, but we don't have a sleeping bag. We don't have a bow and arrow. We don't have enough money to go to a ball game. So they can apply through that 501(c)(3) for a Daddy Wishes Fund grant up to $250. And they need
mm,
to, in doing that, say what they want the money for. It's not complicated. It's not, we don't have a set application. You need to say why you want to do it and what you want to do. And you need to promise to show us after you've done it some evidence that you've done it, not because we don't trust you. And you can write a poem, you can do a video, you can do whatever you want to show us you did it. And again, it's not because we don't trust you, it's because we want to have other dads be able to see ideas for things that they can do with their children. So that's what the Daddy Wishes Fund is. The Daddy Appleseed Fund is a fund that helps support things like the Daddying Film Festival and Forum. And in this year 3, we're also looking for outside support for it. We didn't try to find outside support in the first year because since it was brand new, I didn't feel right about asking people to take a chance on something that may not happen in a good kind of way. But after the first year with submissions from 17 countries and the kind of films that we got, we realized, yeah, this is something really important and worthwhile. So last year we had some outside support for it. This year we're looking for more, especially looking for a corporation that wants to get associated with this because it's a feel-good thing. I mean, how could you be against positive father involvement in a kid's life? How could you be against?
mm,
Um, and one of the things that we have discovered, and you and I talked about how different life is now, and how more challenging it is to be a parent than it used to be in terms of all of the scary stuff that exists in the world, and all of the social media that exists in the world. That it's just really, really important to be talking about this issue and to be getting dads involved. Uh, this is the 13th podcast I've been on in about 3 weeks. When I
mm,
started in this field in 1994, I could have told you 5 organizations that existed in support of fathers. Now I
mm,
can tell you the organizations that exist in a mile radius from where I live. Podcasts didn't exist, of course.
mm,
So there is more and more awareness. Also the whole, societal discussions about gender equality and different gender roles and so forth. So there's much more acceptance of the importance of dads being involved. Um, Part of the genesis of my being in this work, my oldest daughter is 57. We lived in New York City when she was born, and I used to take her to the playground. There was never another dad in the playground. I was the only dad in the playground. And I walked in one day when she was just shy of 1 year old. We didn't have um, sort of baby slings. I put her in a backpack on my back, and I walked into the playground, and one of the mothers said to me, "Are you babysitting today?"
mm.
I'm a New Yorker, and that triggers, I get triggered with stuff like that. And so I just looked at her and I said, "No, are you?"
Mm,
So the whole notion of, when a dad is with their child, they're either suspect for some reason, they're considered, gee, maybe, you have custody on that particular day, so that's why you're a kid with your kid. So all of that has begun changing dramatically. The fact that there are changing tables in men's restrooms around the country now. That would never have been so 30 years ago. So the changes are dramatic. I've written about what I call the daddying movement, which is basically unrecognized, but it's equally as powerful as the women's movement was. It's just done in an entirely different way, and it's one at a time. So having a podcast, which I congratulate you on, is doing what you're doing and getting the word out, is so very, very important. So that's definitely one of the dramatic change among the dramatic changes in the 30 years since I've been doing this.
Appreciate that. So with the fund, can dads anywhere apply for that?
Yes, but it has to be through a 501c3 organization.
Okay.
So we can't make a grant directly to a dad. We're restricted about doing that.
Okay.
But we can make the grant to a 501c3 quote nonprofit organization, who then in turn can get the money to the dads directly.
Okay. Yeah, I'll spread the word about that. That's
Yeah.
pretty cool. I love that. Love that. Um, what advice would you give to other fathers who are striving to make a positive impact on their children's lives and the lives of other families?
So the main advice is get over the thought that you could possibly be a perfect dad.
Mm.
There ain't no such thing. And as a matter of fact, when I did my focus groups with kids, one of the groups I did happened to be with 14-year-old boys in New York City. And it was the first group I did. And one of the questions I asked was, if you could create the perfect dad, what would he look like? So you don't have 14-year-old kids yet, but when they start being teenagers, a lot of eye rolling when dad asks, quote, dumb questions, and pretty much any question is dumb during those years. So this kid rolled his eyes and he looked at me and he said, Mister, there is no such thing as a perfect dad. And if there was, he'd be really boring. And so I told him I agreed with him. And so we changed the question in all the subsequent focus groups with, if you could create the most excellent dad, what would he be like? So it's having dads understand there is no such thing as a perfect dad, and moms too, by the way. It obviously applies to moms as well. There is no such thing as a perfect dad, but it's really a good idea to think about, how would you like your child in this sort of sense peer into our lives? If I say to you, and when we do our workshops, becoming the dad you want to be, we used to say, who is the dad you want to be? But if I ask you that, or any dad or any mom, who's the mom you want to be, that's immobilizing in its broadness and its comprehensiveness. So instead, what we say is, how do you want your child to describe you 5 years from now as their dad? That's still massive, but it's approachable, it's doable. So the advice would be, acknowledge there is no such thing as the perfect dad. Think about how you want your child to describe you as a dad 5 years from now, 10 years, 20 years from now. And of course, going back to what we talked about at the beginning, the qualities kids said they wanted in the most excellent dad they can think of: being there, taking them as seriously as they take themselves, being a passionate advocate for us, show us your love and be affectionate, and provide us with security and protection.
All right, good stuff, man. If there's dads out there listening to this, good stuff, man. I'm praying that I'm getting it. I'm taking this stuff in, man. This is some good, very, very, very good stuff, man. I got one more question for you.
Yeah.
If you could go, I know you're 125.
Right.
But if you could go back and talk to the 18-year-old version of yourself, and give that young man one piece of advice going forward, what would you say to him?
I'd say to him, savor, embrace every minute of being a dad. Because I don't think we do that enough. I can assure you, and just like I guess that your first male teacher was fifth grade and PE, I would guess that you are with a 10, 8, and 7-year-old in what I call the automatic pilot stage of parenting. It's like a lot of reaction, just so many things going on at the same time. And most of us do not take the opportunity to savor and to really appreciate those moments that are worth savoring and appreciating. Um, and again, we talked about, I think it was before we were recording, about taking your kid as seriously as they take themselves. And I'll give you one anecdote. So I was talking to a parent during one of these interviews, and he says, I have a 1-year-old. How do you take her seriously? How do I show her that I'm taking her seriously? So I told him this anecdote, which is a true anecdote. So it's a father talking to his adult daughter who had a 1-year-old. And she said to him, it's amazing, Dad, how differently my 1-year-old responds to you when you come than how she responds to my mother when she comes. This was a family that had divorced. And I said, well, tell me what happens when the dad arrives and what happens when the mom arrives. So she said, well, the mom arrives, and this family is living in an apartment, big apartment building in New York City. She says, mom rings the bell, hands me her coat to hang up, sees my 1-year-old daughter at the end of a long hallway, sitting on the floor playing with pots and pans. And she stands at the end of the long hallway and she holds out her arms and she says, Jane, Grandma's here. And I said, and what happens when Dad comes? Well, Dad rings the doorbell. I open the door. He hangs up his coat. And he sees my daughter playing with the pots and pans across the hallway. And he goes over and he sits down next to her and he starts playing with her. So one of those parents is taking a 1-year-old seriously and the other is taking herself seriously. Could be the other way around, of course. But it's the notion of taking your child as seriously. So I guess those would be the two bits of advice that I would give my 18-year-old self. And by the way, as an 18-year-old, I knew as a little child that I wanted to be a dad. So I might have listened, although if a 125-year-old geezer said that to me, I'd probably say, yeah, what the hell does he know, that old guy?
Oh yeah. No, that's some good stuff, man. Like I say, man, I've definitely appreciated this talk, man, and it's given me a lot that I can think about. Like you said, as you can imagine, there's a lot that I'm just going through trying to, I've been on this journey for 10 years now. Well, my oldest will be 11 next month. So almost 11 years into fatherhood. And, I'm constantly learning, just trying to learn better ways to deal with them, to let them know I'm here, to new ways of discipline, just trying to learn how to be a parent. And, some days are better than others, man. Some days I'm like, I am not good at this, man. Like this is crazy. But there's other days where, you feel good about everything. You feel good about what you're doing. Your kids are coming to you about different things, and it feels good to know that they love me, in spite of all of my downfalls, all of my shortcomings, where I know at times I'm just totally wrong. And I'm able to go to my children and tell them that I'm wrong, I was wrong, and I'm apologizing. And and they're always just so loving, like, it's okay, daddy, and just give me that grace. And just trying to learn, man. It's a lot. But doing stuff like this, being able to talk with other dads, it helps me in so many ways, man. Like I've sat down, I've talked with over 100 dads now, and hearing the stories and just gaining that wisdom from other dads is everything for me, man. So I appreciate you coming on the podcast and sharing with me. It's helped me a lot.
Thank you, Anthony. And I appreciate your having me and doing what you're doing. And if I give you one piece of advice, you said your kids are giving you some grace. You got to give yourself some grace as well. That's really important. And you're being able to acknowledge to them and to say to them, maybe I should have done it differently, and I apologize to you. That goes such a long way. And you're modeling for your kids when you do that. So if you would send me your postal address, I will mail you a couple of things that might be of some interest. And also, get the word out if you can. And anybody listening to this, please submit your films. When people say to me, but I don't have a camera. I don't have a fancy camera. I say, you have a production studio in your pocket. It looks a lot like this. It's a smartphone, and you're doing it all the time. So we're not looking for professional quality stuff. So go on the website, www.daddyingfilmfest.com. All the information will be on that. There is a submission fee. That's what we've learned happens in film festivals. Anyone who has any problem thinking I can't come up with $20 to submit this film, just let us know, and we send you a waiver, and you don't need to pay anything. So we don't want anybody not to be able to do it because they can't afford to submit their film.
That's good stuff, man. That is great stuff. So, for the listeners out there, you guys heard it right there. Go to www.daddyingfilmfest.com,
Perfect.
and if you can submit videos, submit something there. And I think this type of stuff goes far for fatherhood. For us to be able to see these different types of see everyone's different, all the different dads out there. Everyone's experience is different. And so to be able to capture your experience on film and be able to share it with the world, really, I think that's powerful. That's powerful. So please go to the website if you can, submit it. And yeah, man, I think that's all we have for you today. Something else I was gonna ask you, and I can't remember. Um, so I'll send those guys to you that we talked about. I'll make sure I send them your way. I'll
That's
make
great.
sure that I'll make sure I send them your way, and I'll email you my information and stuff so that you will have that, and we can stay in contact. And I think that's it. It was something else I can't even remember now, but
So it's lost in memory, not from memory. So it'll come back
yeah.
to you. But for the listeners, so the dads that Anthony was just talking about, so we're doing the live version of the forum in Philadelphia. And so we were talking about a panel that Anthony was on about a while back with guys from Camden, New Jersey, and from Philly. They're 15 minutes from each other. So we have a lot of involvement from people in Philadelphia and hopefully in Camden as well. So it'll be great. So thank you, Anthony, and thank you so much for what you're doing. So giving a voice to dads, because sometimes there's this theory, it's called the theory of the unthought known. The theory of the unthought known, not the theory of the unknown thought, the theory of the unthought known. And it goes like when you speak about something, you sometimes don't know you knew it until you hear yourself say it.
Mm.
So that's why what you're doing is so important. Dad, can we talk? So a guy hears himself answering one of your questions, and he doesn't realize he knew that until he heard himself say it. I know it sounds weird, but it's true.
Mhm.
So, all right,
So,
I can't help.
man.
I told you I was an educator, so I can't help myself.
Oh, that's good stuff, man. So yeah,
Okay.
I guess we'll end it there. I appreciate you once again for coming on and sharing your story and sharing everything that you shared. And hopefully everything goes well. We're gonna say that everything is gonna go well with
It
the
is.
film festival. And yeah, man, I appreciate you.
And if you're in Philly or Camden or anywhere nearby, it's not far from Baltimore, it's not far from New York City. Get yourself on May 17th to the Parkway Central Library, the main library, which is where it's taking place. And it goes right back to what you said. It's changing the narrative of fathers one story at a time. And of course, the library is filled with stories. And that's why we're
Mhm.
doing it there. So. All right. See you in Philly.
Oh yeah, I hope we're planning on it. Planning
Okay.
on
That's awesome.
it.
All right.
Yes,
Thanks a
sir.
lot, Anthony. I appreciate it.
Yes, sir. Good talking with you, man.
You too. Bye-bye.
Yeah.